Hey, Steve.
Hey. Jack's with us, Dr. Jack. He's going to be the featured talent tonight. Glad you're here.
That's the term they use in the porn industry.
Is that, wow, that fits. That fits.
Thank you.
You bet.
Sounds good.
Too late to worm out of it at this
Yeah, I'm
point.
stuck.
Yeah, you're stuck. All right, let me get my screen shared. If I remember how to do this. It's been a while since I've taught online, so and I'm going to get the presentation mode. Hopefully. You're sharing this screen. Screen I really want to share is the other one. Let me get out of this and go back in and do it again. Let's share this screen. All right, can you see that okay, everybody?
Yeah, go back to the first screen.
Oh my gosh, that's not the first one anymore, is it?
No, I want the straight on image.
All right, let's go back. How about that one?
There you go. There you go. Good.
All right, well, introducing Dr. Jack. Go ahead, pal.
So this is Kent Cooper's technique. And Kent has been working with me on my layout for 20 years. He's a very talented guy. He's a graphic designer, but he's also a master carpenter, and he built my tables. And so after Kent would build a table, and we did this over the last, 18, 19 years, where he would do like an 8-10 foot segment, and then I would spend months working on it. And that way I didn't get overwhelmed, and it took years to do the whole loop, but it was a nice way to do the project. And then I do all the details and the buildings and the lights and everything. So as you all know, there are multiple ways of doing streets like this. Eric Siegel has a nice video online where he creates asphalt, but he demonstrates it more for like a road crossing. Right. And what's nice about Kent's technique is, as you can see, you can cut real long strips. And I'm gonna go through the steps of how we did it. And so let's go to the next one. Okay, the challenge is doing the curves. The straights, as you'll see, are easy. And the material we're using is either that pink or blue Dow foam. And this is the 1/4 inch material. And because the flanges are so exaggerated with our trains, what's nice about this material, as I'll show you, all you have to do is run a truck over with some pressure, and it'll create a depression along the inside and outside rail that gives you enough of margin for a groove. The middle, you really don't care about as long as it's above the surface. The only downside to this material is it's soft, and you have to be careful because it's easy to dent. The other nice thing about it, these cracks were just made with a pencil. So it gives you the ability, once it's painted, to kind of add some chalks and put cracks in it and make it like an old roadway. Next. So here again is where the trolley comes out of a tunnel. This is Cargrave's track. And I've only done this technique with either Cargraves or Ross because the height is perfect for the 1/4 inch foam. And you can see, if you look on the outside rail, do you see how there's a bit of a depression? So that gives you enough clearance for the flange. Now, the other way of doing it, and I'll show that, is just cut the pieces narrow enough so there's no contact between the outside rails. I like this look, especially for a trolley. Next. Again, you can see the groove has already been made. And you can splice this stuff together very easily. It's painted. Once it's cut, then you go ahead and paint it with just a latex light or dark gray. And it's very easy to piece together. And actually piecing it together makes it look like real roadway. Next. And here again is the straightaway, and it gives you a really good image of the depression created along the outer rails. Next. Same thing. Next. Now, on sidings where there's a lot of train traffic, here the foam was just cut narrow enough that the flange easily drops into it. And you can do that whatever you're comfortable with. It's easy to cut it a little tighter so you don't have to push the foam down. Next. And this is more of the siding. You can see I painted the rail, and that makes it visible because there's a big enough gap here. All right, so let's talk about how we do this. Next. So when Steve talked to me about doing this, I looked around and I didn't have any more foam. Fortunately, my friend Mac McCluskey had a few sheets of this, but I actually went to Home Depot because I prefer the pink, and I'll show you why. The trouble is they wanted me to buy an entire case of this stuff, like $60 worth, and I said, no, thank you. And fortunately, Mac had a couple pieces of the Dow 1/4 inch in the blue. Next. Don't need a whole lot of tools. You just need yourself an acrylic caulking, either with very little silicone or none. And the reason is if it's got a bunch of silicone, then when you go to paint it, it won't absorb the paint. And a couple 11 blades and just a good ruler. It's a pretty simple method. Next. And one of the tricks is when you're doing curves is just push after you shape the curve, push it down into the foam and it'll create a pattern for you. Here's the problem with this blue stuff. It comes with this miserable plastic on one side, and you gotta peel it off because one, it will inhibit the paint, and two, if you're using it on the other side, it'll interfere with the caulking. So the worst part of this whole thing was just peeling off the blue stuff. I can't remember for sure. I think the pink doesn't come with it. And if you're going to use a lot of it, it's worth it to get the pink. But they absorb paint and everything else is the same. Next. So here a piece has been painted, and the one thing, whether it's pink or blue, you got to do 2 coats because it absorbs the paint quite readily. You can see on the left side is where there are 2 coats, and I wanted you to see what 1 coat looks like, and the foam is bleeding through. Next. So here's the nice thing about painting it and getting that miserable plastic off. You've got your pattern for cutting. Now, I asked Kent about this too, if he had a better way. Unfortunately, the only way I know to do this is freehand. And this is important. You don't cut in the depth of the groove. If you do, the piece will be too wide. I think that should make sense. You gotta cut, whether it's the inner or the outer, you gotta cut so that you're essentially getting rid of the groove and you're cutting along that inner or outer edge. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Because otherwise you got a piece that's just too wide. Okay, so it just takes a little practice with a nice sharp knife. And here's the nice thing about this foam. If it isn't perfect, it doesn't make any difference because it's malleable and it pushes down between the track. And so if it's not perfect, you won't notice it anyways. Next. So here I am cutting it, and just takes a little practice, but it's pretty easy to do just with a nice sharp blade. I'm also going to show you that actually it can be even easier than this. If the curve is not a tight radius, you can actually just use straight pieces because it'll bend very nicely. Next. Okay, so see here you can see I've elevated a piece. It's not perfect, but it's going to be fine. This really is more important to do if you're trying to do really tight curves. Then you want to use the impression and go ahead and cut it. Next. So this is upside down, but I think you can see it. I beveled it. I'm trying to remember the proper names of a rail. Isn't the bottom of a rail where it flares out called the web? I can't remember what it is called, but here's the thing. You need to bevel in on either side because think about it, you're dropping this down into the rail. And if it's a perfect rectangle, it'll push it back up. But if you bevel it a little, it'll drop nicer in between the rails because you got the base of each rail. Very simple. Next.
Oh, are you talking about the flange?
The flange, well, not the flange of the rail, you're right, as opposed to the flange of the wheel, exactly. So you want it to drop inside between the two rails, exactly. So here 2 pieces have been cut out, and the nice thing about doing it this way is you already have the correct radius for the piece that you're gonna put outside the ties. So on a curve, rather than having to recut, and if you know, I just did this as a demo, I could have cut a bigger piece. Now all of a sudden you've got the inside and outside pieces that you're gonna push against the inner and outer aspect of the tie. But you can cut it again with another piece. Next. Okay. So here you can see this is a very crudely curved piece of Cargraves, but you can see the piece that I've cut matches it very nicely. And you're going to have an inner and outer radius. But again, this stuff is very malleable. That's what I like about it. You know, some people will use hard materials. I'll show you later, you can use plastics, but this stuff's just so nice to work with. Next. So you can see that the piece that was cut is also going to match the piece it came from. So now you got the piece that's going to go on the outside of the track. But remember, you got to do 2 layers on the outside and inside of the track to have it get to the height of the rail. And that's why with these tracks, both Cargraves and Ross, the 1/4 inch matches it very nicely. I haven't tried it with other tracks. Next. Stop me at any time if you have a question. So here are the pieces that were left over that are of the correct inside and outside radius after harvesting the inner pieces. And I put a couple screws just on this board to hold the track in place. And then you're just gonna use the caulking to hold this down. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect at this level because it's the second level that's gonna adjust to the outer rails. Next. So I put some caulking down and I'm gonna put this piece on. And this goes very quickly with the caulking. Next. So I've got an inner and outer piece that are now caulked. Now I'm gonna put the pieces that I already cut inside the rail. Next. So here's the piece with the proper curve, lots of caulking. And the reason is when you push it down, it squishes down between the ties. And you want to make sure you got plenty to hold it. And if some of it comes up through the inner outer aspect, you can just quickly wipe it off. Next. So here's the piece in place, okay? I pushed it down. I just use my thumb and fingers to go along and just keep pushing it to make sure it's not above the level of the middle rail. The outer rails, I don't care because I'm going to depress those secondarily anyways. I just want to make sure it's not going to inhibit the middle rail. Next. So sloppy with the caulking. Now going to put the second layer on, which you want to be at exactly at the height of the rail. And the nice thing about the 2 layers of 1/4 inch with this track, it just works out perfectly. Next. So here you can see, and I'm a little sloppy with my caulking, but you can see I'm right against the rail. Now, I probably didn't cut it perfectly, but that's one of the nice things about this material. If you look way over to the left, you see how I got a little bit of a gap? If I just push, I can close the gap. So again, because it is malleable, you don't have to be perfect to get it to go against the edge of the track. Next. So now I've got the other internal piece, and I wanted to show how it's easy to join pieces. And if anything, it makes it look real because, as you know, there's always going to be gaps anyways. And junctions. The nice thing about this material is it comes in such long pieces, you can cut yourself some really long segments. Next. So now I have finished, and those, I wouldn't normally put screws in the foam. I just did this so I could go quicker. Now you can see I've already run some wheels so that I'm depressing right along the inner and outer rails. The other option, as I showed you, is just don't make it quite as wide a piece. I just like this look for a street. I just think it looks more like a real street. Next. So here's a close-up of the material, and you can see it's a little higher over the middle rail. I just take my thumb and push down, and just it's a very compressible material. Next. So that's if you really want to be neurotic, but if the curve isn't that tight, that piece that you see in there, that's just a straight piece. So if you're not making, you know, trolleys made incredibly sharp, tight radiuses. But if you're not doing it that tight, you don't even need to struggle cutting curves. You can just cut yourself some straight pieces and put it in there. There's a lot of materials you couldn't do this that easily with. Next. So here's taking a truck and going back and forth, just making sure that it's not going to hit the flange of the wheel. And I just like the way that looks, having it filling up the entire track. You know, if we were scale railroaders, wouldn't have to do that. But they don't have as much fun as we do. Okay, next. All right, here's where life gets real easy. You've got these sideways, but that's fine. Cutting long straight pieces. It goes much quicker and it's a lot easier. Next. Again, caulking, putting lots of caulk on the inside and just dropping that long piece in there. Next. So that's one piece. Obviously, you're going to do the same for the second piece. And the nice thing about doing it the straight ways is you don't have to fiddle as much. You just measure the distance between the rails and just do it a little bit less. Next. So now I'm piecing together the second side, and I've also pieced down the outside. And here I just made it the width of what I thought I want my street to be. And there's no reason to paint the first level because it's going to get covered up anyways. Next. So here both sides of the street have been laid down. And now you're going to do the second level. Next. And so you can see on the bottom, I've already cut a piece and I've painted it. I used a slightly darker paint here than on my railroad. I think they both look good. You just kind of pick what you think looks more real. Next. The nice thing about it being dark, it kind of hides the middle rail. So here you can see the inner pieces. The track have been done, the inside and the outside. And you see how I put some nails in? I just did that while it's drying. If you have a sub road bed that is wood, that means you don't have to fiddle with it a lot. You just put some nails and it'll compress it to hold it against the rail on the outside while it's drying. And you can just walk away from it. And the nice thing again is because it's malleable, even if you're not perfectly straight with your cut, it'll push in against the rail. Next. So here you can see I took the truck and I ran it back and forth, just to make sure I have the proper depth on the outer rails so it doesn't obstruct the trolley or the train. Next. So is this the video or is it the next one?
I think it's the next one.
Okay, go.
Oh,
No, you screwed up. It was that one. Can't you hit it so it'll play?
yeah. That's it.
Oh.
Yeah, you sure it's not the next one? This
Oh,
one.
there it is. I was wrong.
All right, let's
Okay.
go back. Okay, what do you
Yeah,
want to say
I-
about this one?
Yeah, just that the nails are holding in place. And with the caulking, it dries very quickly. Yeah, that's what I was doing, just showing the nails. Okay. And so this is the miserable blue that my friend Mac McCluskey gave me. If you can find it in pink without that layer of plastic, it's not that big a deal. You just got to kind of peel it off. Sort of like peeling a chewing gum wrapper. Okay. Next. So 1/4 inch works great. I'd be interested what height, and maybe it would work with Atlas and the others just as well. Not sure. Next. Okay. Video.
Now I get to run it, right?
Yeah. So it just shows you it's running without any problem. And that's just because I depressed it with the wheels.
We got to watch that
Okay.
again, Dr. Jack. That's so cool.
Yeah. If you had the sound on, you could hear the jets that were flying over the house, but that's okay. That is, go back and do it one more time without running. That is a Gorgie trolley that, you know, those were just push toys, but you could get a motorized kit And I put that in, and then also I made an interior. And with the interior, I covered up the motor and I put an LED light in there. And it really is a cool little trolley. I also didn't like the roof and some other things, so I repainted some of it. But it's a very nice trolley. I can't even remember where I got the motorized kit.
Oops.
Now, that's fine. All right.
All right.
So-
Okay.
All right. Ken Cooper is a much better craftsman than I am. This is the Steve Nelson addition in the freezer room after negotiating 2 years with my wife, who said if the house collapses, she'll kill me. And so this was just going to be a storage area. And somehow the storage area got heavily Nelsoned with lots of buildings and even a turntable. But Kent wanted something different. This is a black plastic. And what's nice about it, it has a rough edge. So Kent painted it white or an off-white, and then took a piece of sandpaper and lightly sanded it. So what it did is it gave it a real concrete kind of look with a very variegated surface. The challenge is you got to cut this stuff with a saw, and you got to cut it just right. And Kent did, but he did a really nice job of cutting it so you could fit it in there. But it's rigid. So the pieces that are in the track, you had to cut narrower so the flanges of the wheels would fit in. But it gave it a good look.
Looks very good.
Yeah, that was Kent. And then I did the buildings and all the detail and the cars and the gravel. And again, what was gonna just be a storage area just kept going and going. And so now for the trains to go from this 10 by 14 area, the trains now go through a hole in another wall, solid cinder block, under the porch, front porch, through the furnace room, and then connect with the layout you've seen. Nobody's ever gonna buy this house. They're just gonna come down here and look and say, you gotta be kidding. Next. So this is just the railroad crossing. Can you rotate that, or is it too much work?
No, I could, well,
Don't worry
I
about it.
liked it that I could do it much larger by doing it this way.
Okay, then leave it. So Kent made me the sidewalks and I finished the street, and you can see here, I cut the pieces of foam narrower, so I didn't have to worry about the trains coming over it. And I think that looks fine too. So that's cutting it just a little narrower than where you saw the trolley streets. And then if you really want to get neurotic, and I know some very neurotic people, I actually weathered the ties.
Yep.
But that's when you probably need some medication. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you very
great.
much. Any
Yeah,
questions for Dr. Jack?
Yeah,
This
This is Joe Gozo, Dr. Jack, and
Yeah.
first of all, I'd like to thank Steve for sharing the video of your layout. It's incredible. I was amazed when I saw it, and
come visit, Joe.
yeah, I'd love to. And I don't have anywhere near the space that you have, but I got a lot of great ideas just watching the video. And one of the things in particular that I liked were the bridge piers that you had. I believe they were wooden, and you had a stone wall kind of like in between the framed area of wood. It's probably one of the nicer bridge piers I've seen.
Was that on, did some of that show up today, or you mean in the past?
No, that was in
the
the-
video. Yeah.
That was in the video of the of your layout. I think it was one of the first ones he did.
Okay, so I have several different bridge piers. I'm gonna carry, well, I'm not gonna move this stuff. You remember, because some is plastic, some is wood, and some actually is a piece of wood covered with that paper that you can get from Micro Mart, that you can get in O gauge, that looks like brick, or you can get it in stone. Do you remember? Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think it was stone, and the wood was kind of like a creamy yellow color. It looked like it was painted.
Hang on, I'm walking. I'm right next. I'm right next. I don't like traveling. My study is next to the train room. Oh, yes, yes. That is Ken Cooper's brilliant work. He made that out of wood, okay?
Right.
And what he did is the inside is just plastic stone from Scenic Express, okay?
Right.
And then he covered it with pieces of wood.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, that is
Very
beautiful. Nice. Yeah, he did that on either side. That is Ken Cooper's beautiful work. The other thing is there's a big area where I still had some nice old G-scale brick. And actually the size is pretty good. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, I bought some of the flexible walls from a gentleman named John Atherton. He sells a lot on eBay, and he makes a rigid wall like that, and he also makes a flexible wall.
Oh, so great.
I'm thinking about trying my hand at making a few of those for my Hellgate that I have.
Yeah, they'd look fantastic on that. Right. And yeah, I had forgotten. Yeah, that's Kent. Kent can carve just about cut anything.
And excuse me, I know that's a little off from what you were showing us, but I still appreciate you showing us that that trolley foam. That's an excellent way of doing it. And I may try my hand at that as well.
And you can just do it for a railroad crossing. In other words, you don't have to do massive streets like I have. It's a simple technique just for a railroad crossing.
Well, and I like it. I did watch Eric Siegel's video that you were talking about, and I thought he did an excellent job to make the black asphalt look there, but I'm looking for a slightly different look.
Yeah, concrete.
Yeah.
Hey, Jack. You had a question on the chat line about how you go about weathering your track. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I talked about it last time. I use, it's called leather. It's it might sound like a funny color, but I just think it looks really good to try to create rust. The first thing you got to do is all the tracks we get have a little film of oil on it. I don't know if that was for shipping, but especially Cargraves has this oil on the rail. So I take some alcohol and a rag and make sure I get that off. And then I just take a small paintbrush and holding the track kind of vertical so it doesn't run off, I just run it along with the paintbrush. And if I get it on the top of the rail, it's no big deal because you've got a few minutes to wipe it off. It takes a fair amount of work, but I've always done that. And I'm pretty quick at doing it, but I just like the leather color. I've tried others, and if you look at real rust on a real rail, it isn't quite as bright as the leather. But, you know, we're not dealing with the real world. And what I like about it, it just stands out.
Wonderful. Any follow-up questions for Dr. Jack, you guys? Well, let me just thank you again for putting that together. As always, you exceed, my expectations. That was wonderful. And I appreciate it very much.
It
Thank
was
you so
fun.
much.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.